everyone. We are moving through our module series now to look at service delivery systems. And the focus of today and a lot of the resources that I have really is on the vocational rehabilitation process. And so I don't want to provide you with the same information that the main vocational rehabilitation services orientation video tells you. It's quite repetitive if I were to do that. So I just want to note that to review that video, number one, to get a really good idea of what the first steps of going through the VR process would look like for our client. Okay, so vocational rehabilitation, as we know, are the state agencies that provide rehabilitation counseling services to individuals with disabilities in the community, including youth with disabilities who are transitioning into employment. So, go ahead and review that video and take a look at these the first section of slides that I have on the VR process. All of this material on the slides today is going to be really useful for you in our final exam. I will say that. So, and I hope I outlined it in a pretty easy way. The notes also that are available for this week's module are useful as well. So I know that the focus is not completely on mental health counseling this week, but it is important as part of your introduction to rehabilitation counseling to understand the process, the vocational rehab process for clients, even if you're not working in vocational rehab, because you might have clients that could benefit from VR services. Vocational rehab agencies see an incredibly high number of clients with mental health impairments, mental health disorders, and substance use disorders as well, people that are in recovery, of course, but so there might be some potential here for referral, and it's important that you're knowledgeable about the process. So if a client is needing a referral to Voc Rehab or looking to become a client of Voc Rehab services, you understand what that process might look like for them. I think this is a good point to make in this stage is that it is a process. So whenever somebody is interested in seeking out vocational rehabilitation services, it's not that they can just simply walk in the door and they're automatically linked up with a counselor and they start right then and there. There's eligibility determinations that need to be done in order for a person to qualify for Voc Rehab. Right now there's an order of a selection in place, and so people might be put on a wait list for a little while, meaning that the Voc Rehab counselor, the rehab counselor can provide some services, those initial services, the intake, orientation, but getting an actual plan for employment signed, individualized plan for employment, it might be later on down the road. So there are, again, a number of different phases to the process. When you get into your client services class and case management class, you're going to be digging into each of these, the services that are provided through the evaluations much more in depth than what I'm going to get to today, okay? But when a client comes in, they might go through kind of these different analysis, these like a vocational analysis, they might go get a psych eval, they might need a medical evaluation. All of these things might need to be done before a Voc Rehab counselor starts engaging in that real hard talk about what type of job they're going to be doing, what type of job the client might want to do later on, because the rehab counselor's got to have all the information, right? They got to have all the medical information. They have to know if a client's been released to return to work, if they're eligible to work, if they're actually working, or if they are able to work and in what capacity can they work. If they need to have a psychological evaluation, they need to have all that information, and psych evals can take a long time to schedule and get back. So all of this information needs to be gathered prior to the Voc Rehab counselor sitting down with the client and saying, you know what, let's focus our job exploration process on in this certain area based on what I know that you can do, what abilities you have. So I'm trying to just scroll through here a little bit. When it comes to job placement, again, I'm not trying to repeat the stuff that comes through the main orientation video, which is very well done, or I wouldn't put it up there. But when it comes to the actual job placement part of it, some individuals may not have any job seeking skills. Sometimes we might take it for granted that we know how to build a resume, that we have computers to build a resume on, that we are able to access technology, that we know how to do a job search. But some individuals may be starting from scratch, or they may be moving from one career track to another because of an onset of a disability or medical condition. And so people might have job seeking skills at a different level. And so some of the things that a counselor might do are kind of independent work with that individual, or they might have a job club that they're referring the client to so they can get some skill development with peers, job readiness clinics. So there are a number of different ways in which vocational rehabilitation can support the development of job seeking skills with clients. I mean, ideally, we're helping our clients, regardless of the situation or setting, we're helping our clients build skills, build tools that they can have for the rest of their lives so that maybe they don't actually need our services at some point down the road. So when it comes to vocational rehabilitation, the goal for every client is gainful employment, to get a job that is a good job for them, a good fit, and one that has opportunity for upward movement, right? So vocational rehab counselors are not simply just putting people to work at a fast food restaurant or a big box retail store. That could be a perfect fit for clients, of course, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because God knows right now Walmart's one of the only places open, and so we need employees to be working there. So, but for clients that are able to do more and want to be able to do more and want to and see themselves in a long-term career and potentially getting promoted down the line. So there are all these supports that can be put into place so that a client learns how to advocate for themselves, learns how to navigate the world of work independently. So when it comes to the private sector, I'm trying to kind of look through here a little bit too. Vocational analysis, got all that. Job placement, got all that. Sorry. Private sector. So again, private sector would be, for example, where I worked was at Cigna, and I worked for the long-term disability group at Cigna. And so the clients that I was working with in vocational rehabilitation were beneficiaries of long-term disability. And so the short-term disability, long-term disability, clients typically move from short-term to long-term after a certain amount of time. And my job as a rehab counselor was to work with people on long-term disability to get them off of long-term disability and back working. So private sector typically means there's a fee for service. Private sector vocational rehabilitation has been around forever. Been around in insurance companies, workers' compensation, and now we're seeing the private sector being corporations hiring rehab counselors to help facilitate the process of their workers getting back to work after, let's say, a workplace injury or coming back after cancer treatment. So I provided some information about different types of jobs that are available, workers' compensation, all of that. Forensic rehabilitation is an interesting little niche of vocational rehabilitation. Typically, you got to have a good amount of education under your belt. You have to have a lot of experience under your belt, and potentially even have some additional training so you can get certificates in forensic rehabilitation post-graduation as well. But these individuals will sit as an expert witness for Social Security determination purposes, potentially for employment discrimination cases with like the EEOC or state agencies that represent clients in those situations, well, or the other side too, I guess. But within personal injury, life care planning type of court cases, they might a rehabilitation counselor might be called in to be an expert witness. So this is like the job that I would love to have because they get paid a lot of money. You have to have a good amount of experience under your belt too. And you have to know how to be very non-biased when you're sitting up in front of a judge giving some testimony. So when it comes to the actual facilities and support services, that's the other piece of my lecture today, right, is the facilities and support services that are available. So there are a number of rehabilitation facilities that are more like an in-home facility for individuals with disabilities. The Arkansas Career Training Institute is one, the Wilson Workforce and Rehab Center is another, and so these are facilities where individuals and potentially even their family can come on site, live there on campus, and go through kind of a more intensive vocational rehabilitation process so that they are well equipped when they go back to their communities to find jobs, actively find employment, and remain employed. Those organizations are accredited by a different accreditation body, but I did put some information on there if you want to look into those a little bit more. So kind of to wrap it up, in terms of school to work transition, this is a newer area, not a newer area, I would say. Oh, I just touched my face. When it comes to transition services have always been a required part of a rehabilitation counselor's job at the state level. So what happened with WIOA is that there was an re-emphasis on the need to have rehab counselors in schools earlier to help our youth with disabilities effectively transition from high schools on to post-secondary education, employment settings, some type of vocational training, whatever it might have been, but rather than have them kind of left hanging after graduation, because statistically speaking, that's what we were seeing, that these students with disabilities were just kind of left. And when you have a gap in programming, right? Whenever somebody is actively working towards a goal, working with trained professionals, and that goes away, even for a short period of time, the motivation goes away along with it. So what the goal with the transition service and pre-employment transition services as well was to set our students with disabilities, adolescents and youth with disabilities up for more long-term success after graduation.